Wow, thanks, Jenny. Well, the only thing better than today would be if we were all together in Kentucky. That is the part that I'm sorry that we can't be together, but hopefully this pandemic will work itself out and we can all get back together in Kentucky. I see a lot of go racers, go Murray State. Yeah, I'm a Murray State racer. I'm a Western Kentucky boy by that's where I grew up, and it's just such a warm. I don't know. It's so warm to be back in Kentucky with friends. I live in Colorado. I work nationally on the topic that we're going to talk about today, but and like Jenny said, I got my doctorate in Vienna, Austria, and I went to New Haven to get my master's. But I'm a racer. I'm a Murray State racer, and I got my Murray State racer colors on today, and I graduated from Callaway County High School there in Western Kentucky as well. So this is just exciting to be here with y'all. I'm going to see if I can figure out the technology, make sure that all works, and we'll start with taking my slides to slideshow. And we'll start talking a little bit about, okay, we're set to go. Today's presentation that I'm going to give. So I'm Adam Chambers. I work for USDA, the Department of Agriculture, Natural Resources Conservation Service. And we have, let's see, there we go. And so at NRCS, we work with private forest landowners, ranchers, farmers across the whole country to implement voluntary conservation practices. And we're blessed with the support of Congress and the White House, and we are able to go out into the field. My job, I'm fortunate, I work nationally, so I'll go to organic strawberry farms in California one week, and then literally back when we used to travel, I a week or two later be up on the kind of North Shore of Alaska working with Native Americans who are suffering from climate change and needing to move inland and subsistence in their subsistence lifestyle. So it's a really, I'm blessed to have this career. I love it, but I love Kentucky more. So what I'm going to talk about today is tailored to Kentucky. At USDA, we work across all different agricultural systems. You heard me talk about subsistence, people living off of, literally hunting off the ice in northern Alaska, to, moving strawberries across the country to hit the 4th of July parade type deal from California to Maine, let's say. So we've got a real great agricultural production system in the United States. But I thought I'd go back to where I started, which is Crossland, Kentucky. And this is where I'm from. I would, if we were in a room, I'd say, who's ever even heard of Crossland, Kentucky? This old farm store used to be operational when I lived there. I used to kind of ride my bicycle down the street or down the road a couple miles to pick up pop bottles and then buy candy at this store. But this is kind of where, as a daydreamer or a dreamer, my dreams of environmental change began. This and my family support to work in this field, and I've just always worked in this field. I feel really fortunate. But like I said, I am a dreamer, and I challenge you all just for a second to dream. So go with me on this dream. This is a fictional slide here. We have a whale carrying an airplane, and I wanted to take you down the dream that I dream. And this is the dream that I kind of live by and work by, and I see the huge opportunity for it. And that dream is, imagine us as a human species. We have the power to change our planet for the better. Now we've started to change the planet to heat the planet, right? But now we have this opportunity in front of us to wrap our hands around it and to change the planet for the better. So just imagine that with me. Imagine we humans collectively also got $500 billion every year to make that change. So $500 billion and a dream. And so I want you to take both of those things and park them in the back of your brain and dream with me on where we can take spaceship Earth. And I think it'll. I hope that I'll come back around. But Kentucky's about dreamers, right? We're about making dreams become reality. Many of you might be familiar with this sign. It's please take a minute to read it. It's in Christian County, Kentucky. Harry and Lawrence Young started no-till farming. They were the first farmers in Kentucky to do this, and they were among the first in the nation to experiment with no-till farming. Many of you are probably even familiar with this sign and can point it out on the side of the road. Then if you read down a little bit further, so they implemented this in 1962, no-tillage techniques, which use herbicides and providing a seedbed in residue stubble. It conserves soil and water, saves time, labor, fuel, and often produces higher crop yields. Now that sign's old. There are some things we've learned actually since that sign has been put up. And one of them is about climate change. And the other is we also know that there are ways that we can implement practices that we can use crimpers, and we have other ways to terminate cover crops and things like that. So Kentucky's about dreamers, right? I mean, we all are here and we all know that as a fact. There was also another dreamer. Let's see. There was also another dreamer. His name was Mr. Keeling, and Keeling, about the same time. So you look at the time frame here. He thought that we should start measuring the carbon dioxide concentrations in our atmosphere, and he developed a concept that he got funded through Scripps, which is called the Keeling curve. And what you're seeing here is the Keeling curve. And the Keeling curve, remember that sign said in 1962. Well, here you're seeing that Mr. Keeling started his work in 1958. So about the same time. And remember the sign said reduce fuel consumption, build soil health. We can sequester carbon as well. And Mr. Keeling's curve persists to this day, and it's a measurement of carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere of the planet in a very pristine location on the top of Mauna Lea volcano in Hawaii. And the most recent reading is 420 parts per million. And you'll see that Mr. Keeling's curve started just below 320 parts per million. So remember my dream of humans changing the planet for the good. This curve represents humans putting carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. That gas stays in the atmosphere for plus or minus 100 years, and it likes to hold heat. So when the sun's heat comes into the planet, it doesn't leave as quickly, and so the planet heats up. So this is a cause of climate change. It's just factual, and this curve is monitored every day, and they take samples of the gas of the atmosphere. Now let's go to the other piece of that dream. The other piece of that dream is, here's the annual shape of that curve. So if you go back with me in time, here's the annual curves are oscillations, but they're in kind of an upward trajectory and kind of in kind of a mountain-like trajectory. Now, if we zoom into 1 year, we get the curve that looks like this. Of course, it's not a perfect curve. The blue is smoothed out. The calculations and the measurements are all over the place, but they represent the shape of this curve. So the curve goes up and down, but the long-term trajectory goes up. What I want to focus on for the rest of today's presentation is the part that goes down, because this is our opportunity. And as dreamers, remember, we have opportunities and we can make those reality. So what happens in the Northern Hemisphere between May and early November? Photosynthetic activity. And we have a large amount of that occurring in the Northern Hemisphere. So what's going on is you're drawing down. Many of you have heard the terminology, the drawdown. Well, that's exactly what's going on here. You're drawing down carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere with photosynthetic activity that's occurring in the Northern Hemisphere. So we can actually do this. We've seen this since 1958, this oscillation, and we know how to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, and then we also know how to reduce emissions to the atmosphere. So as a climate scientist, and I put my slides in kind of a little bit of a disarray here, but bear with me. We often talk about this challenge to our species, which is we are the first generation to fully understand this problem. So I just went through the problem with you. And we're the last with the ability to solve it. That's a lot to carry for us. That's a lot to carry on our shoulders. But I think it's an opportunity as well. So let's go on that dream together. So we understand the science. I'm not going to take us through a lot of the science, but we also know that working lands agriculture, which is what we do with NRCS, you all do it with your state programs. At the local level, I saw a lot of people cover crops and agroforestry, and I own a woodlot. All of that is super important. Now let's think about how we can utilize all that to be part of the climate solution. We can be part of the climate solution through voluntary programs that deliver real benefits to the atmosphere that are quantifiable. And those are climate solutions. That's the basket of things that I call climate solutions. But I also want to be fully respectful that we're producing food, fiber, and fuel for the world as we do all of these things. So it's a little bit of us needing to do two things at the same time, but we also might be able to get rewarded for doing two things at the same time. So we know that climate change affects agriculture, and we know that climate change affects forestry kind of the same way, right? Forests are perennials, and they're bigger plants, right? So we also know that these two sectors in particular can address climate change through either mitigation or adaptation or both. And we know if we make modest investments today in mitigation, so reducing those gases that go to the atmosphere, because remember, they stay in the atmosphere for decades to centuries to millennia in some of the highly potent gases. They stay in the atmosphere and they just rotate around the planet and they hold that heat. So if we make a modest investment today, we have to make future less investments in the future. However, the opposite is also true. If we don't make mitigation steps and we don't take steps to reduce emissions today, we're going to have to invest more in the adaptation and resilience of tomorrow. So it's really pay now, pay later. But I think we can make the modest investments now and reduce the emissions that are in the atmosphere for the future. Now, the hard part about the agricultural sector is we're generating food, fiber, and fuel first. Then we're trying to reduce greenhouse gases, and we're working. And so in this slide, you have, this is a colleague that I work with out of Colorado State, Amy Swan. You have a whole bunch of diffuse sources of greenhouse gases from the ag sector, and you have a whole bunch of sinks. So gases move in and out. Most human activity actually produces greenhouse gases. We can reduce the amount of greenhouse gases associated with those. And then like the cow, we know that they ruminate and out of their mouth comes methane. Yes, we do deal with the manure. I think it's an 80-20 split, 80% out of their mouth. Rice, we know there's a little bit of rice grown in Kentucky, definitely in the Mid-South on down, Arkansas, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, you're getting a lot of rice. Methane there, it's the same gas as comes out of the mouth of the cow during its rumination. We got carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide. So what I'm looking for are intervention opportunities where we can put in that working lands conservation and intervene in the nitrogen cycle and the carbon cycle and reduce emissions, and then maybe get some economic benefits associated with those. So we know from the NRCS work, and this is 80-plus-year-old work, that working lands conservation, it actually works. It works as a climate solution. It works for producers. So whether it's cover crops, grazing management, conservation buffers, conservation tillage, anaerobic digesters and manure management, feed management, we have many opportunities to intervene and reduce emissions. And we do that through the NRCS programs. Some people call them farm bill programs or voluntary conservation programs that we all support through our tax dollars. So just to give us a little visual here, we see an opportunity here in this slide to the left. This is what I would call a conservation opportunity or a resource concern being presented to us. There's a soil health problem here. There's a water quality problem here. There's an atmospheric problem here. But if we take the steps to implement a grass waterway, we can change that problem into a solution, and we can solve it for the atmosphere, solve it for the water, solve it for the soil health. Here's another one, transition to grazing management. What we see on the left is a low productive system. Soil health is being degraded. Animal health is being degraded, livestock health and sustainability. But we see an opportunity there, an opportunity to work with the producer and implement a grazing management plan, implement improvements in that forage, move those animals around, making sure that all works. And that's an NRCS conservation practice. Let's take a look at another NRCS conservation practice. We can transition to no-till, reduce till, and manage our residue. We have soil health opportunities, atmospheric, nitrogen management, and long-term regeneration and sustainability. So we can change that system to the left to the system to the right. That protects our investment as well, because a lot of that soil that's coming through that fence is not on the field any longer. So this is my last slide on our opportunities and transitions. We have the conservation opportunity here to put in a riparian buffer. We can improve riparian health, sustainability, regeneration, soil health, and a bunch of other environmental benefits. And we can make it look like this, which is a higher carbon system. So we can begin to move carbon out of the atmosphere through voluntary conservation practices. So that was the voluntary piece. Now we're going to talk about the real piece. The real piece is about the quantification methodology, and that's where I spend a lot of my time. I spend a lot of my time doing math for USDA, and then providing summaries of how these conservation practices deliver benefits to the atmosphere. So I'll give you a second here. We have a number of kind of soil health conservation practices. And again, this should be thought of as an a la carte menu. We don't want to take everybody to a no-till system. Not everybody can do a no-till system. Many folks can't. Cover crops, same thing. There's an opportunity, but sometimes that doesn't work. And so what we've tried to do at NRCS is provide an a la carte menu that allows folks to look in here and say, oh, I can put in a nutrient management plan and some grass waterways, and that's where I'll start. Or, we could put in a herbaceous wind barrier, and I might want to put in some prescribed grazing or a range planting out west. Or maybe it's let's work on some agroforestry practices and some upland wildlife habitat practices, whether it's an endangered species out west or a riparian herbaceous cover, like we showed in one of the slides. So what we've tried to build is an a la carte menu that are climate solutions. And we call these, or people started calling them, climate smart solutions. So climate smart agriculture and forestry is something you might hear from time to time. Now, for the benefit of today's discussion, let's just hone in on cover crops. I could have honed in on no-till, but I decided let's take a look at what NRCS has done in Kentucky on cover crops. And I work nationally, so I'm working across all different states. Later on today and throughout the the meeting, you're going to hear from other NRCSers that work specifically in the state of Kentucky. I just want to highlight the great work that they're doing there. So if you take a look at this, this is our real data. This is a graphic of, remember that climate smart mitigation practices in the state of Kentucky. These are acres that have been completed and delivered with the participation of producers in Kentucky. So you can see over 14,000 acres in 2014, a little bit less in 2015. 2018 had a really high, over 16,000 acres of actual acres completed with the help of the folks in Kentucky, the conservation team there in Kentucky. So this is just time series. And remember, you may sign up for planning of a conservation practice in 1 year, and it may take a year to get that implemented. So this is just when those practices are completed. And so you got over 16,000 acres there in 2018. Hopefully some of that sticks around over time. The piece that I wanted to kind of get into and demonstrate today is you also have environmental benefits associated with those. So we know that there's photosynthetic activity going on. We know that not all of the carbon moved out of the system, out of the atmosphere, is going to stay out of the atmosphere. There's going to be respiration, and some of that's going to go back. But there's a fraction of the carbon that stays, and it stays in your soils as healthy soils, and it doesn't go back into the atmosphere. And that's the fraction that we scientists kind of keep tabs on and keep track of. So in here, now you can look at, so I took the acres, and then I did a quick calculation of the benefits to the atmosphere in metric tons of benefits but for those cover crops in that given year. And I guess what I'm trying to deliver to you here is that you can put in a cover crop, and then you can begin moving carbon out of the atmosphere. So it's a climate solution. It's climate smart conservation practice from that list. And then we can do the calculations and the quantification associated with that. And we will report that up to both Congress and also to our leadership and the White House. So they get awareness of, oh, cover crops deliver a climate solution. And I think the president spoke about that about a year ago, spoke about cover crops. And so you can see cover crops in Kentucky are delivering a climate solution. And so before I take the next step, I want to step sideways and just go through a little bit of analytical stuff. Sorry to get too analytical with you, but if you think about the rings of a tree, and we've all sat down probably on a stump or counted the rings of the tree and said, oh, this tree was 48 years old. Well, I'd like to use that analogy. There we go, for NRCS contracts. So we have an NRCS contract that may be a 3-year contract with a windbreak. So we've got 1, 2, 3 years. And so that carbon is on the NRCS books because we keep track of it because it's financial expenditure and it's contracted. So you'll see that the little pieces of that tree represent an NRCS contract, a 1, 2, or 3 year contract. So that's the NRCS contracting time. However, this is probably the most important thing I want to send everybody home with is we also know that there's a large amount of carbon accrued beyond the 3 years of that contract. And that's a term that I came up with called the conservation legacy effect. And the conservation legacy effect is once we set a system in motion to accrue carbon, it continues to accrue carbon. And so you get a positive feedback loop. And that's really a good thing from a climate scientist perspective is you get more carbon actually accrual in a tree in year 4 than you did in year 1, right? When it was a very small sapling. Year 5, year 6, year 7, you're getting more. Year 10, 12, 15, you're getting even more carbon accrual. So that's what the conservation legacy effect does, is it brings forward the benefits associated with getting more conservation on the ground today. You can also think of it as compounded interest on carbon. Once you get a system moving toward more carbon, it likes that and it moves further that direction. I think it was Warren Buffett that said the eighth wonder of the world is compounded interest. So I would say the eighth wonder of the world is actually compounded interest in the carbon arena. So then I can do my calculations based on the conservation legacy effect. So remember that cover crop was the acres in the blue lines. So the blue lines are how many acres are delivered by NRCS and completed in that given year. The green line then is what are the atmospheric benefits associated with that. And then the yellow line is what about the conservation legacy effect? What if we were able to get cover crops on the ground and then get producers to continue using cover crops? So we get that compounded carbon interest. And that's what we call the conservation legacy effect. So when I present calculations for the nation or for a state, I always present the direct benefits, so the green line, and the conservation legacy effect. What if we keep that conservation on the ground? I've got one other graphic that really shows this, and I think many of you producers can be familiar with it. You may buy a piece of ground, and this is actually a piece of land that we had some long history on. So you can see it was broken out and cultivated in potatoes in the late 1800s. And the soil organic carbon, the SOC, on the left, on the y-axis, is depleted very quickly. So that oxidized. And if I were in a room, I'd say, well, where did that carbon go? And we all know where that carbon went. It went into the atmosphere. So it's oxidized, you lose your soil organic carbon. And then you can see there was cultivation of potatoes on this field out to 1950, where they stopped and they planted grass on this particular field. And then there were manure and grazing additions that started to regain that soil organic carbon over time. So you can rebuild that, and that carbon is coming from the atmosphere. So we need to shift away from putting carbon into the atmosphere and start pulling it out of the atmosphere. And then we can use computer models to take this same field, the Stemple Creek #6 field, and look at how you can build soil organic carbon back over time. And this is the huge opportunity. And remember what we said is if you get the system moving in this way, it will kind of help itself as long as you nurture it and bring it more toward a carbon-rich environment. You also build available water holding capacity in this system, which means that if it rains, we can hold more. If it rains extensively, we can hold more water and maybe not have as much runoff. So you can definitely see where soil organic carbon can be built, and we want to capture that opportunity and deliver on major climate solutions. So we've got an a la carte list of practices that we can select from, and then we can take it even one step further. And let's talk for a moment about what if you were able to get paid for this? What if producers were able to be part of the climate solution and get paid to be part of that climate solution? So let's go back to that dream, remember? Dream that we could affect the planet in a positive way, and we had the resources to do it. So at USDA, we've worked extensively in this arena of trying to get producers rewarded for voluntary activities that reduce emissions. In 2014 timeframe, we highlighted a project that was the Chevy Motor Company. You can see Senator Stabenow in that picture to the far left, gentleman from General Motors, and then some USDA leadership to the right, Mr. Robert Bonney, who's there today. And we had a first of kind sale of carbon credits on working ranch lands. This particular project utilized ranch lands out of North Dakota, and then Chevy retired the carbon credits associated with it. So that's a market-based opportunity. That's back in 2014. Here's just a schematic of how the process worked. You have a rancher who generated the carbon credits. We had a verification, third-party verification. that then occurred to make sure the credits are real and fungible and tradable. And then Chevy Motor Company purchased those and then paid Ducks Unlimited, because Ducks Unlimited served as the aggregator, and Ducks Unlimited passed back the money to the ranchers. So what it did is it kept ranching lands ranching, and they had to implement practices and then measure the carbon associated with those, and then ultimately the carbon credits were sold. We had another project just south of Kentucky there in Arkansas where I've spent a fair amount of time. These carbon credits were generated and sold to Microsoft to offset the carbon footprint of the Microsoft company. So I guess in kind of conclusion of what my discussion is focused on, it's about, remember that food, fiber, and fuel production of agriculture products. We definitely want to do that, upper left. Then we want to really focus on that soil health and the opportunity that the ecosystem provides us, including photosynthetic activity. Then can we build new and emerging market opportunities for producers to participate in, again, so they can voluntarily participate? And then can we provide some assistance to help them do that? And the answer to all the above is yes, we can do this. And this is not only a dream, it's reality. We can make this dream absolutely 100% of a reality. So I want to kind of wrap up and maybe go to a few questions. So, but before I do that, I'll conclude with a few observations and just try to re-emphasize the things that I would like you to go away with, which is voluntary working lands conservation. It delivers as a climate solution. So we actually have climate solutions that we know how to implement right now. And that helps accomplish our kind of working mission within USDA and NRCS, which is we are getting more conservation on the ground. The second piece of this is these climate solutions, these mitigation practices, they're quantifiable, and our legacy, how we leave the planet, is critical. Whether we have cover crop on cover crop on cover crop or no-till in a long duration is critical, because the carbon accrual grows over time. Remember, kind of like the rings of that tree. So we want to get more conservation on the ground, and we want to keep the conservation on the ground. This is a challenge for all of us. Let's keep the conservation on the ground in addition to getting it up on the ground. And then the benefits are being tracked within NRCS. And we're supported, this whole effort has been supported through Farm Bill, through the generous support of Farm Bill, which is Congress, the Secretary of Agriculture, Secretary Vilsack right now, the President, and they have all leaned into this. They've spoken extensively about exactly what we talked about today, and they really get it. They understand it. And that's that work, as Jenny mentioned, has been a continuum for a long duration. And we've kind of just worked methodically trying to deliver climate solutions for farmers, ranchers, and private forest landowners for a very long time. And now is our opportunity to really double down on that. So I started with a little reference here that we kind of all talk about, but maybe don't think about all the time, which is we are the first generations to understand this problem of climate change, like, wholeheartedly, and we're the last with the ability to solve it. And I can't help but give you a little story. I've got a work colleague, and she called me up and she said, how do you sleep at night knowing what you know about climate change? And so I thought about it for a minute, and I said, well, the truth is we're the first generations to understand the problem, but we're also the first with the tools to solve it. So the opportunity really rests upon our shoulders. And I think that's the way I look at the world, is we do have the tools and we understand how to use those tools, but the tools are critically important to be delivered in the proper way. So up in the upper left, we've got planning. That's my buddy, Jeff Creek. Jeff Creek represents planning. Conservation planning is critically important. We can utilize photosynthetic activity in the healthy soils to deliver on these climate solutions. Lauren Ponza over there amongst the cows in the in the grayish green jacket, that's actually his field, that Stemple field, that rebuilding the soil carbon curve. That's his field. He sells steaks and other beef products to Whole Foods and gets a premium for that because he is managing his land for carbon and he's increasing carbon stocks in his land. And that was an old potato field that he had, and he had to invest in building the soil carbon back. In the lower two slides, I really do believe that that's the future of our nation, is to be a conservation minded agricultural nation. And I think we can really deliver on this vision with the help of NRCS and USDA Farm Bill programs. But it's not just about NRCS and USDA. I mean, we can be a leader, but we all need to be leaders. So I empower you and challenge you all to go out and be a leader in whatever way that you can to come up with those climate solutions that deliver both for today and for the future. And then the other piece of the leadership puzzle that we have the great opportunity to deliver on is we can be a leader for the world. And we have an opportunity to deliver on that leadership for the world. And when I shared my dream with you at the very beginning, imagine if we could change the world. We can. And then I'll go all the way back to that $500 billion question. What if we had $500 billion annually to deliver on that climate solution? And we do. The money already exists. Global Farm Subsidy Program is about $530 billion a year. That's on the low side. So that's $500 billion a year. What if we simply redirect global farm subsidies to be climate solutions? That's our opportunity. In the United States, we're very blessed and very fortunate to have the Farm Bill, the NRCS farm programs. Not every country in the world has that, but there are these farm subsidies that are around the planet. So there's $500 billion that we just need to redirect. So we have to be the visionaries, and that starts in Kentucky. I promise you, we can do it. And all we need to do, and the money's there, we just need to work to redirect it. So with that, I think I can open it up for questions. Jenny, I kind of ran 36 minutes or so. I don't know how much time we have. I'll defer to you on that.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. We've got some time for questions, and so you did indeed give us a lot to think about in all of that. And you've got some people thinking about ways that they can investigate on their land. So I'll start out with Carissa asking, what ways do you see the small to mid-size farm best participating with these conservation practices? And kind of to tag on to that, well, I'll let you answer that one, and then I've got one to tag on.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the exciting part of where I work at NRCS, we work extensively with small to mid-sized farms. So the other piece of that, my answer is going to be a little bit of perspective that I want to just make sure that everybody understands. And we've worked pretty hard within USDA to split this little piece, which is if somebody works with USDA programs, Farm Bill programs, they then do not forego their ability to work in environmental markets. And we've spent a lot of time trying to make sure that that's clear. And what that does is, from a government perspective, we are trying to change the landscape of the United States. Every farm is critically important to do that, big and small. And we worked to make sure that if you receive federal assistance to implement these practice changes, then you don't have to forego any carbon benefits or any environmental ecosystem service benefits. So the first thing I would say is there are resources out there for small to medium-sized producers, and they're specific to that. So, and that's at the federal level. I don't want to speak for the state programs in particular, but we worked really hard to get that, and that's actually in the 2014 and 2018 Farm Bill, which says if you receive this money, the U.S. government doesn't own your carbon credits. The U.S. government doesn't own other ecosystem services. So that avails you an opportunity to work in the market. I kind of won that argument by saying, well, if a wheat grower wants to sell their straw, that's not USDA's business. If a wheat grower wants to sell carbon credits, that's not USDA's business either. So if they want to put cover crops on a wheat field, that's fine. And so the first piece is we've tried to be crystal clear, and Congress has actually been really generous with this about how they implement what the practices are paying for. There are some easement practices you have to be careful with. So then to small and medium-sized producers, the next question is, what can you get on a per acre basis? And I think this will also answer one of the other questions in the chat, which is where are the biggest carbon benefits per acre on a per acre basis? And the truth is that the really kind of high value carbon benefits are going to be in the perennial biomass and soils. So if you have silvopasture systems, if you have tree systems, those are going to just accrue more carbon on a per acre basis. Now, if you have, and that's where, and we worked also to develop a bunch of quantification tools that are free to producers called the COMET tool. So we've got a COMET farm tool and a COMET planner tool. And what that will do is allow a producer who has, one producer has 10 acres of silvopasture that they want to implement, and another producer may have 1,000 acres of cover crop. And so we want to be able to both quantify the carbon benefits on the cover crop, 1,000 acres, which a cover crop is going to be a small amount on a per acre basis, but you could have a large acreage, or you could have a large amount on a small amount of acreage, and you could actually come out, they could come out equal, they could come out one way or the other. So we've, at USDA, we've tried to first provide the quantification tools so that everybody can do the quantification. Secondly, to answer your question, just because of their nature, woody biomass and practices like that, in addition to soil health practices, are going to really deliver kind of the maximum on a per acre basis. Now, all of that said, we also want to be production agriculture. So we want you to be in production. We don't want to run somebody out of production. We just think it's an opportunity. And there are two clear ways to work on packaging those carbon benefits. One, I've seen a lot of focus on carbon credits, which definitely are a way to do that, which is you have a credit or a token that represents 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide equivalents, and that could be sold independently. The other way is to put that as a wrapper, a green wrapper on a product. And so it's a product grown in a more regenerative or more sustainable manner, and thereby may fetch a higher price. And so you can either have a separate individual widget called a carbon credit, or you can have an integrated green component of a product and sell that for a premium. So there are many different ways that this marketplace, and again, it's a early stages in the formative years of the market, even though you saw the 2014 timeframe of price discovery and making sure that all the rules are properly followed and then delivered upon. So I think these are great questions, and you know there is some kind of market track record, if you might, at this point. Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah. So you got my tag on question that I was going to get, which were what are those biggest winners of those different practices, and kind of looking a little more at the COMET and COMET planner tools that are available to farm and land managers and all the ag professionals who are working with them. All of that is online and available to use. Can you tell us a little more about the data that's on the back end supporting those tools and how they're modeling and quantifying? I know you showed us a little bit of that with the slides, but could you expand on that a little more in layman's and women's terms?
Yeah. Yeah, and I apologize if I got too atmospheric. I tend to do that. I've just always worked in the atmosphere, so I worked in Jefferson County in Louisville area for many years, and it's just kind of what if it's the only thing you've ever done in your professional career, it's you can kind of glaze over things. But so we have a set of tools called the COMET Farm and COMET Planner tools, and they're free and publicly available. But more importantly, they are in lockstep with what's called the national inventory. So we will, as a country, and every country, I think, on the planet has agreed to putting forth their national inventory. And as the United States, we put forward a national inventory every April 15th. And we tell, and then there's usually press that comes out, United States emissions went up 15% or went down 19%, and that is our national inventory. And we put that forward to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And we've done that since 1992. So we calculate all the emissions from agriculture, all the emissions from transportation, all the emissions from the energy sector. And we compile that into a big 600 or so page document and hand it over. And that's our carbon footprint as a country. On the COMET tools, we take the same models within that national inventory and we utilize for the ag sector, and we utilize those models at the farm level. And so that when somebody does a calculation in the COMET tools, they then can quantify in the exact same way that the national inventory is done, so that we don't get too much of an apples to oranges comparison. So we at USDA think it's really important to work with producers and deliver them with the best available science and tools. And those are the COMET tools from USDA, and they carry the USDA logo. And they allow producers with a lot of inputs to do the calculations. That doesn't necessarily mean the markets that we just discussed, whether it's a carbon market or an integrated carbon benefit in a food product. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to use that, but we avail the best science to the public, and that's just part of us collectively putting our taxpayers' dollars together and investing in quantification tools and quantification methodology. So I spend a lot of time working on that. It's not the most exciting, but at the end of the day, it kind of delivers where we have this big opportunity, where we see a big opportunity, let's say for cover crops or in a livestock manure management system, and how we could maybe utilize our farm bill dollars and prioritization on climate smart agriculture to deliver on more of those voluntary practices.
So with those tools, and I'm tying into a question here, so not asking you to go deeper into the COMET tools, but I know with those tools, a farmer can put in, right now, this is what I'm doing on my farm in terms of practices, and then they can put hypotheticals in of what if I added cover crops, and it will do the calculations to give them back a scenario of what kind of sequestration they're getting. And you shared with us the farmer who is selling carbon credits and doing business with Whole Foods. Do you know, can you explain any about the economic impact that came of that to that farmer, that rancher?
That's a great question. That particular farm is right outside of San Francisco in Marin County. And so that producer has a relationship with Whole Foods. Whole Foods has a carbon intensity requirement. I think on some of their, I think they even have it, if I recall correctly, it may be displayed. And so what that producer has participated in is, and okay, let's start with the comment tools. So the comment planner tool was adopted by the state of California, which has a pretty rigorous program on climate change and a cap and trade program. But then all the money that they bring in through that cap and trade program, they spend on climate solutions. And they selected the comment planner tool to be able to quantify the benefits of their investments in agriculture. And so the California government, and I worked with them extensively to set this program up. And so then you have the California government, in addition to the federal government, paying farmers and ranchers to implement voluntary conservation practices. Again, this is all on the voluntary side. So Lauren Ponza, in that case, I think he has participated in the Healthy Soils program, California Healthy Soils, which is modeled after NRCS's program, but it's state money. And he received money to put on compost application onto his pastures, and then to manage his animals in kind of a more of a mob grazing type system, where he's got multi-paddock grazing, and he moves the animals through quite quickly. However, in Lauren's case, I haven't spoken with him since the pandemic, but I'm pretty sure that the carbon benefits need to go with the meat to Whole Foods, because that was part of the important component of that. You can't double count, right? We all know you can't sell carbon credits twice. You can't sell that meat twice. But the Whole Foods required that the benefits that Lauren is delivering be part of the meat that they sold in their meat department in San Francisco. So I think he has to hold on to those and pass the benefits on with the product. And that's just one example. You could have organic strawberries that do the exact same thing. And really so the benefit can either go with the product, or it can go as a fungible independent widget, which is a carbon credit. And there's a few questions on that.
I just wanted to kind of think about Whole Foods in terms of being a one step beyond the farm in that supply chain. And is there, are you seeing a lot of movement in that direction as far as, you've been talking to us about our farmer role in this, and yet we're touching so much else with our food, fiber, and so the supply chain, are you seeing a lot in terms of that?
I can't pick up a container and not see it. It seems like it is everywhere. I have containers that talk about the producer that put the product into the box or into the packaging, containers that say that the company is going to go 100% carbon neutral, beyond carbon neutral. It seems like every package almost that you pick up, if you take your time and really look at it, it's associated with it. Now, the important part for me, and I think for USDA, is making sure that what is said is done, and what is done is said. And I think we've worked really hard to make sure that for example, the integrity of an organic label has integrity with it. And so we've tried to provide these quantification tools, make available to producers what options they have. Also tell producers that if they utilize Farm Bill programs, they can still get other benefit, provided the market is supportive of this. Again, we don't administer the market. We just help the markets understand agriculture, and also try to help agriculture understand the markets a little bit more. That we're seeing large corporations, small entities, a lot of players in this space. And I think the important part is that we deliver real benefits. and that we don't get too far out over our skis on what we can't deliver, but we stay within our scientific realm and our scientific understanding. I think that's really the important component is, and that's why we've spent so much time working on the quantification tools and all the quantification that I do, is to make sure that our scientific integrity is there and available to the US ag sector. So that then when I'll switch, a company produces a net carbon neutral wool hat from fiber grown produced in the United States, they then can go, oh, okay, it truly is net carbon neutral, and here's our numbers to back it up. And I think that's kind of the exciting opportunity here. Is some of the quantification stuff has kind of come center to the discussion, and people are very focused on the integrity of numbers, because we don't want the number of commitments to be 3 times the actual benefit that we can achieve. So we want everybody to achieve the benefit that they advertise they achieve. And then the other piece that I continually work on is, I think that producers should be included in the upside, financial upside of this. And of course that's between a producer and a relationship, but if you implement a practice and you make efforts to reduce emissions and you can quantify that, it has value. That's a valuable piece of information. And so the marketplace is starting to recognize that and go, oh yeah, we want producers to share in the profits as well.
And thank you so much for returning to your home state, even if it's just virtual, to inspire us and to educate us about this dream and our part in it, and so many things to look forward to in the future. It really is a win-win for everybody if we're collectively doing our part. So we appreciate you. We thank you for your work and for sharing it with us. And unless you have any final thoughts, we'll give you a lot of gratitude.
Well, thanks for inviting me to Kentucky. I really appreciate it. And I wish you all well with your meeting and the ongoing conference. So thank you.